Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Halloween. It's 8 o'clock. It's time to have a, shall we call it, live stream or a dead stream? We will call it a stream. Enjoy the live stream and the day stream and music. Excellent, my friends. Excellent. Is this dark enough for you? Or would you like me to add some light to the subject? Big thanks to my good friend Sensum for that wonderful introduction. Music and animation. I keep the mask on. Oh, you're used to this one. I might as well keep it on. Would you like me to add some further light? Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious by the summer. I don't remember it anymore. I've recorded it, believe it or not. Richard III. Yeah. Make it darker, says Budgie. Make it darker, you won't see anything. Well, maybe that's the idea, eh? I'm sorry to disappoint you, Sensum. I don't remember any more of it. Yeah, well, it's probably less of a joke than you think. I rewatched Richard III yesterday on BBC iPlayer, said Sensum. And the black hat is giving me those vibes. Aha. My smoking cap. Aha. Good evening to what happens. The slings and arrows of no, that's that's not Richard III. That's the Scandinavian. Gosh, I used to be able to recite these quite simply. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it's ever in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing them, end them. So there you go. Had I known you wanted me to say something of that nature, I would have prepared. Well, I am unprepared. Oh, there's Alison. So there we are. Very good, Streaky. To celebrate Halloween, my dentist took out 4 teeth earlier, and now I look like a pumpkin when I smile. Ghost went to the bar, says Gavin, and ordered 10 pints of booze. Nice, clever play on words. So I have a series of material. I have one here to my hand. I'll just show you it. It arrived today. This is it. It is written by our good friend Censor. The Bygone Times. That's the title. The Bygone Times. But I'm sorry to say, folks, it is far too much material for this live stream. There's 30 odd pages here, and that's going to come out to a bit of a long time. So I'm going to leave that for another live stream. And I hope you approve of Sensor's material at the beginning of the live stream. I thought I was bowled over by it, so impressed. Sheila Dotto. Is that really John? Yes, I'm wearing my seldom seen smoking cap. Still got it, of course. Doesn't matter that I don't smoke anymore, but I've got it. A friend bought it gave it to me as a gift. Okay. So as I say, I've got a variety of materials, and we have a guest coming on. I don't know if Ellen Toffee wants to come on, and we have got David coming on. I think Toffee's speaking ad lib, but some experience in the past. Not quite sure what our friend David's got. Well, I'm sure it'll be interesting. And I'm going to start with a recorded piece. Now, the recordings that I made were done in the style of a radio presentation. Now, obviously, you're allowed to use your imagination here, folks. So, the first one I'm putting on is Dracula. The other thing I want you to bear in mind is that these recordings took time to make. And required a lot of help from friends and loved ones. So, for likes of Alison and myself, we'll get a little bit of a jolt when people who are no longer with us will hear their voices in the presentation. So sit back, enjoy yourself, and I hope you enjoy this. This is not all of Dracula, by the way. It's just the opening chapter.
The Journal of Jonathan Harker, 3rd of May. Left Munich at 8:35 p.m. on the 1st of May. Arriving Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46, but the train was an hour late. Budapest seems a wonderful place, from the glimpse which I got of it from the train and the little I could walk through the streets. I feared to go very far from the station, as we had arrived late and would start as near the correct time as possible. The impression I had was we were leaving the west and entering the east. We left in pretty good time and came after nightfall to Klausenberg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for my dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up in some way with red peppers, which was very good, but thirsty. Memo: get recipe for Mina. I found my smattering of German very useful here. Indeed, I don't know how I should be able to get on without it. Having some time at my disposal when in London, I visited the British Museum and made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania. It had struck me that some background knowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with a noble of that country. I find that the district he named is in the extreme east and on the border of 3 other states. The Carpathian Mountains is one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work giving the exact location of Castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own Ordnance Survey maps. But I found that Blinsk, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Mina. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the centre of some imaginative whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. Memo: I must ask the Count all about them. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it, or it may have been the local food, for I had to drink all the water in my carafe and was still thirsty. Towards morning I slept and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been asleep soundly then. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? All day long we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on top of steep hills, such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams which seemed, from the wide stony margin on each side of them, to be subject to great flood. At every station there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers. But others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them, but they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts with a lot of stripes of something fluttering from them, like dresses in a ballet, but of course petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who are more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, great baggy, dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous heavy leather belts nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots with their trousers tucked into them and had long black hair and heavy black moustaches. They are very picturesque, but do not look prepossessing. On the stage they would be set down at once as some old oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Blinsk, which is a very interesting old place, being practically on the frontier. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege of 3 weeks and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Krone Hotel, which I found to my great delight to be thoroughly old-fashioned. For of course I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress, white undergarment with long double apron front and back, of coloured stuff, fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close to her, she bowed and said,
"Der Herr Englander?"
"Ja, Jonathan Harker." She smiled, gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter.
My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the coach will leave and the place on it is kept for you. At the border paths, my carriage will await you and bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula.
The 4th of May. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count, directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me. But on making inquiries as to details, he seemed somewhat reticent and pretended that he could not understand my German. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly, or at least he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He mumbled out that the money had been sent in a letter, and that was all he knew. When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula and could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife crossed themselves, and saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. It was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, for it was all very mysterious and not by any means comforting. just before I was leaving, the old man came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way,
"Mussen Sie gehen, O junger Mann? Mussen Sie gehen?"
He was in such an excited state that he seemed to have lost his grip of what German he knew and mixed it up with some other language which I did not know at all. I was just able to follow him by asking many questions. When I told him that I must go at once and that I was engaged on important business, he asked again.
"Wissen Sie, welcher Tag es ist?"
I answered that it was the 4th of May. He shook his head and said again,
"Oh ja, ich weiß, welcher Tag es ist."
On saying I did not understand, he went on.
"Ist es der Abend vor dem Tag des St. Georgs? Wissen Sie, das guten Abend, als die Gloch Mitternacht schlägt, wird alles Böse in der Welt herrschen? Wissen Sie, wohin Sie gehen und wo Sie gehen?"
He was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort him, but without effect. Finally, he went down on his knees and implored me not to go, at least to wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I therefore tried to raise him up and said, as gravely as I could, that I thanked him, but my duty was imperative and that I must go. He rose and dried his eyes and taking a crucifix from his neck offered it to me. I did not know what to do, for as an English churchman I have been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolatrous, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse the old man, meaning so well, and in such a state of mind. He saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for he put the rosary round my neck and said,
Ihrer Mutters willen?"
and went out of the room. I am writing up this part of my diary whilst I am waiting for the coach, which is of course late, and the crucifix is still round my neck. Whether it is the old man's fear, or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I do not know, but I am not feeling nearly as easy in my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach Mina before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach.
I hope you enjoyed that. You're absolutely correct, Woodlander. Coach Journey is quite something special. It's taken from notes that the author made on his annual holiday to Scotland. Thank you very much. We'll see how the time goes. I could play the second part a bit later on, if you wish. Thanks very much, folks. Well, I had to stop because I did not have enough personnel to cover all the parts. And beside, the best part of the novel, as far as I'm concerned, is the castle. So I think the novel gets a bit bogged down on London gossip and just takes away from that absolutely stunning opening. No, I do not say so. I do not. Are you all quite happy with this lighting arrangement? Or would you like me to put on an electric light? I thought we could at least start with this. I can put on the electric light if you prefer to see a bit more. Oh, you're okay then? Okay, doke. That's fine. What time are we? 20:32. Sense of ass, says Streaky. Can't you read 50 Shades of Grey for him, please? You all seem to be rather happy enough with the lighting. Well, dark is cosy, that's for sure. One's a real candle and one is an electric one. The electric one was bought for me as a Christmas present from my sister. Okay. I'm going to play now an original short story. My friend Jerry, who you heard in that recording, he was a great lover of horror stories, ghost stories, and things that go bump in the night stories. And he was always trying to persuade me to write ghost and horror stories. But I tried to explain to him that I always found writing such stories really quite difficult. And the reason I thought that they were difficult to write is because they're not really about anything. You know, you get a spooky location, somebody goes to a spooky location, there's a ghost or something in the spooky location, that's about it. I find that difficult. Anyway, poor Jerry, yeah, exactly. Anyway, he persuaded me to write a few, and this is one of them. So I hope you enjoy this story.
After the Second World War, Greenock was in a pretty sad state of repair. What the German bombers hadn't reduced to grey rubble, the local council planned to. Before the destruction of the town centre actually began, many of the old existing streets were extremely long. All of this was about to be changed forever. One of these long streets was Ann Street. One could, on a fine day, stand at the foot of Ann Street and look all the way up to Drumfrocker Road in the distance. Between Roxburgh Street and Holmescroft Street, there were many shops huddled together on Ann Street, which sold everything from a sewing needle to a bottle of fine whisky. Above were the tenement houses, a crowded and often tangled maze of small apartments where working-class families lived. The streets were numbered odd on the left-hand side and even on the right-hand side. Pubs usually occupied the corner side, and Ann Street was no exception. Where it met Holmescroft Street, a pub stood on the left-hand corner. In number 133 Ann Street, Edward Kelly and his wife Jean lived. Their tiny attic flat came after Roxburgh Street, but before Holmescroft Street. All of this area was demolished in the 50s, along with most of the surrounding streets. Jean and Eddie were newlyweds. Thanks to an uncle of Jean's, they had managed to get a flat. Her uncle knew just who to bribe in the local factor's office. Money was raised and handed over quietly, in return for the keys to the door. Houses were so rare in those times that often the only way for a couple to avoid years of living in someone else's back room was to bribe the right person. It was a common enough practice, and it went on all the time. Few people could afford to challenge the morality of it, and few ever did. The newlyweds had been living quietly and happily there for close to a year before that fateful Saturday changed everything forever. Outside, down on the wet pavement, people went wearily about their business. It was a Saturday morning, and on a Saturday morning, women went shopping in the company of their mothers and sisters, while their men went to the pub before setting off for the game. The game either meant Capello or a larger football setting in Glasgow. For Edward Kelly, it meant supporting the local team. Jean wanted Eddie to come shopping with her. She wanted him to help her pick out fresh paint for the kitchen. The kitchen was central to tenement life. A single small sink, usually located beneath the rear window, housed the only tap where water could be accessed, and because of that, it was known locally as the kitchen. Here, meals would be prepared, cooked, and eaten. Visitors would be received and be entertained there. Here, unexpected overnight guests could sleep it off. thanks to the recessed bed built into the room. For couples longer married, it was a room into which a man might be banished in the event of his wife's cold shoulder to his drunken sexual demands. That Saturday morning started no differently than any other, except that Eddie was going with Jean to the shops instead of the pub and then off to Capellow. They had had words over it, but Jean had talked Eddie round, with more than a little help from the night before. They closed the door behind him with a soft click from the Yale lock and started down the 3 flights of stairs and 3 landings between them and the outside. Jean began to fuss into her shopping bag, looking for her purse, but couldn't find it. By the time they had descended to the last landing, Jean knew she had left it on the mantelpiece in the kitchen. Eddie, not in the best frame of mind, offered to go back up and get it for her, but Jean insisted on going herself. Eddie gave Jean his key and she started back up the stairs. As Jean ascended, Eddie descended to the foot of the close to wait on her. Her footsteps echoed down to where Eddie stood waiting. He heard her open and then shut their front door. He jumped a little because she'd banged it, and the roar of it came flurrying down the smooth walls past him and into the busy Ann Street beyond. He waited. Just then, old Mrs. Brown came waddling into the close. Eddie knew her well enough to stop and speak, and he knew she would stop. Mrs. Brown never missed an opportunity to ask after all her neighbours. When the old lady recognised him standing there leaning against the wall, she naturally stopped. Eddie waited on Jean's return to escape this idle chatter, but no sound of a door being opened or closed came. He listened and waited. His old neighbour took advantage of the chance meeting to offload all the details of a rather sordid love affair that was currently lifting all respectable eyebrows. Time passed, and the only sound in the close was the hushed voices exchanging general disapproval about the latest goings-on. As time dribbled away, Eddie's impatience with his wife grew. Jean, however, remained behind the closed attic door. Minutes went by, and Mrs. Brown was still talking, and Eddie was still waiting. Finally, the old lady started slowly up the first set of stairs to the first landing. Exactly at that moment, Eddie heard the familiar sound of his front door being closed and heard Jean's footsteps starting down. He knew it was her, because he knew her very distinctive way of descending a set of stairs, and he knew well the sound of his own door being shut. Eddie waited on her to arrive. Her steps continued to echo down the close. Eddie heard Mrs. Brown say,
What's you in?
as they met one another on the second landing.
Your man's waiting.
Then suddenly the footsteps stopped. Eddie waited. Mrs. Brown stopped. But Jean's step never came. Silence filled the close as the two of them, each at their respective positions, Eddie at the foot and Mrs. Brown on that second landing, listened for her descent to restart. When it didn't, both became alarmed, almost but not quite, at the same time.
Jean!
Called Eddie, his voice full of concern. The close continued to be filled with the soft sound of air moving through it, but no sound of footsteps, and no reply from Jean. Eddie's alarm, which was now beginning to turn to panic, took hold of him, and he started up the stairs, moving quickly to see for himself what had happened to Jean. On that first landing, Eddie halted, turned, and looked up to the next landing where Mrs. Brown stood looking down at Eddie. The two stared for a long time at the empty space between, in complete puzzlement. Jean was nowhere to be seen. It was Eddie who spoke first.
Where did she go?
I don't know, son. She went right by me.
Was it my Jean?
Aye, son. I'd know your Jean anywhere.
Replied old Mrs. Brown with a tone of certainty that convinced Eddie.
So where is she?
God knows.
Said the old lady, then added,
Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
Jean!
Eddie shouted. He began up the stairs to the next landing, passing the old woman, and continued on up to their attic.
Jean! Jean!
His words ringing round the walls and echoing down to the foot of the close, and then finally outside. Mrs. Brown waited on that second landing and heard Eddie banging loudly on the door high above her. The old lady also heard Eddie call to Jean to let him in. But neither did the door open, nor did Jean reply to his urgent pleadings for entry. Finally, Eddie came back down and told his old neighbour that he was going to fetch the police to break the door in.
She can't be in, son. She passed me in the landing.
She's not there. Where could she have disappeared to?
I don't know, son, but I'm feared. Holy Mary, Mother of God.
Said the old lady, blessing herself.
Oh, God love us and save us.
Wait here. I'll be right back.
Ordered Eddie, and went swiftly down the remaining stairs. At the mouth of the close, he turned left, up Ann Street, and made for the corner of Holmescroft Street, where the local policeman stood, idling away his time. When Eddie returned with the policeman in tow, the old woman was still standing on the landing where Eddie had left her.
She still hasn't come down the stairs, son.
Mrs. Brown informed them. 10 minutes later, having tried the Kelly's door himself and failed to gain entry or reply, the policeman stood on the pavement and blew his whistle loudly for help. He did his best to calm Eddie as they waited on further assistance arriving. It didn't take very long for a crowd to gather around the close mouth, and it didn't take long for help either. 2 more uniformed men, one a sergeant, took over and began where the first had left off. But they didn't do any better, and so finally, with Eddie's permission, they forced the door open and found the house empty. Jean Kelly was nowhere to be found. The police searched the attic and found nothing odd or sinister. They looked outside the close at the back where the rubbish bins were kept, but there was nothing unusual there either. No clues were to be found as to the whereabouts of Jean. She had simply vanished on the stairs between the 2 landings. Eventually, they conducted a full search of every house in the close, 8 in all, counting the Kellys, and still they failed to find Jean. Besides, if Jean had managed to elude Eddie and Mrs. Brown, she would have needed to have jumped through the full-length window on that final landing, which was fully closed, and between where Mrs. Brown was standing and where Eddie stood at the foot of the stairs as the morning wore on and the police became more and more puzzled by the strange events, the wild rumours were already gathering speed. By that afternoon, he had been tried, convicted, and hung for the murder of his adoring wife by the local gossips. Rumour had it that Jean had threatened to run off with her secret lover, and Eddie, in a fit of jealousy, had brutally done away with her. Another line was that he had killed her for her insurance money because he had run up a lot of bad debt. None of this was actually true, but it didn't stop the gossip, nor did it stop the police from taking Eddie in for official questioning. After a lengthy time at the local police station, they finally let Eddie go home with the provision that he could and possibly would be questioned again. And questioned again he was, on several different occasions, with the same result. It all added up to absolutely nothing. Jean Kelly had vanished into the unknown. If she had been murdered, there were no trace to be found inside the flat or in the close. There were no signs of a struggle, no telltale blood stains anywhere. Indeed, according to those who knew the young couple well, they were very happily married, lived quietly, and that was that. The rumours gradually faded, and in time the police were forced to shelf the investigation because of the lack of evidence. Eddie struggled for years trying to clear his name, but in the end, because of the whisperings, he was forced to quit Greenock and seek another life elsewhere. Eddie had to wait 7 years before he could even apply for his wife to be declared dead. Edward Kelly was granted a death certificate after almost 11 years of fighting with Scottish authorities. When that part of Ann Street was pulled down, no human remains were ever found. Jean was never seen again. To this day, no one knows what happened at 133 Ann Street on that fateful Saturday morning. Jean simply evaporated into nothingness, almost in front of Mrs. Brown. It was said that footsteps could sometimes be heard, hurrying down the close, but of course, no one would be there on the stairs. People believed that it was Jean's ghost, forever rushing to meet a husband who had long since left.
There you go, folks. That's poor old Jean for you. Now, we have a guest here, David William, son of Lamb. In you come, sir. Are you there? Device is not connected. Would you like to connect your device, sir? Hello? Thank you, Silius.
Hey, John and everyone in chat.
There he is. Would you like to start again with a little less volume, David?
Sorry, John, was that a bit too loud for you?
It was indeed, sir.
Sorry, did I take eardrums out, John? Tulloche, Oche, Howny, John and everyone in chat. That's Scots Gaelic for Happy Halloween.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope you've
Can you hear
enjoyed
me,
it.
John?
Yes, I can hear you fine. I can hear you fine. It was far too loud when you started, of course.
You've gone, John. I haven't got your volume.
Have you not? Oh, I can hear you, sir.
There you go, you're back.
Good man. So I think we're doing all right so far.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that Dracula. That was fantastic, John. Very good.
Well,
Was
I'll
that your
get
pal? Was that your pal Jerry then?
Yeah, Jerry plays the lawyer who reads the main part of the piece. I had to change just how the material was presented because of lack of personnel.
Yeah.
But Jerry was very happy to do it, you know.
Yeah, he did it with passion. You can always tell when somebody does it with passion.
Yeah.
Plays through. Yeah, it's fantastic. That was. I do like me Dracula. Have you ever been to the actual church, Bram Stoker's church in Dublin, just
No,
outside of Dublin,
no.
where he got married? I think where Bram Stoker got married, the church in Dublin, very gothic looking.
Is it really?
Yeah, bright red door, very gothic looking. Well, John, sorry, go on.
I have a series of photographs of the castle that it was based on. My friend took these photographs for me. So yeah. So what have you got for us, my friend?
Well, I've got a video and a voice presentation for you, John.
Right.
I'll cue it up for you, and I'll just give a preamble for it for you. Can you get it on full screen, John?
I should.
When it's up, yeah. I'll just give a preamble before you play it. I'll cue it up for you. It's pretty much self-explanatory, really. But I'll just give a bit of a preamble while you cue it up. In modern times, phonetically said, Sam Hain, Scots Gaelic, pronounced Sarwin. Oh, can you bring it back to the start there, John?
Yeah, sure.
Here we go, that'll do. You got it anyway. Pronounced Samhain is usually celebrated from October the 31st to November the 1st to welcome in the harvest and usher in the dark half of the year. Celebrants believe that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world would break down during Samhain, allowing more interaction. And here we go. I think I'll let the rest of it talking, John.
Okay, doke. So here we go, folks. I hope you enjoy this. Has this got audio, David?
Oldcastle Lackland's last chief.
Yeah, but there's
Oldcastle
no audio.
Lackland was built in the 15th century with its roots going back another 200 years. It was the ancestral home of the Clan MacLachlan, neighbours to the Clan Campbell, further up Loch Fyne. Both clans were fiercely loyal to the Scottish crown. After the Campbell chief became the Earl of Argyll, the MacLachlans stayed true friends, even fighting on the Earl of Argyll's behalf. At the end of the 17th century and the start of the Jacobite Rising, this changed. The traitorous Campbells followed the new regime, while the
David,
MacLachlans stayed true to Scotland and the Stuart kings.
David,
Is the
David.
volume not playing, John?
The audio's not playing.
Hello, John? The audio's
audio.
not playing.
No.
Let's get it back to the start then.
Okay, doke.
Sorry, John. It might be because I muted my. Is it because I muted my mic? Does it mute the sound as well?
Well, let's try it.
Go on, John.
Go ahead.
Can you hear that, John?
Yes. They had nothing.
Just wait till you see me. That's Old Castle Lachlan.
So that's you sitting there.
Yeah, and that's what we look out on every day across the lot. We see this view. We see Old Castle Lachlan across the lot.
Excellent.
Sorry, John, I didn't realise you couldn't hear it. I didn't want to spoil the beautiful view with my dulcet tones.
Yeah, well, it's obvious that there is no sound at the beginning, and there it comes in.
Old Castle Lachlan's last chief. Old Castle Lachlan was built in the 15th century, with its roots going back another 200 years. It was the ancestral home of the Clan MacLachlan, neighbours to the Clan Campbell, further up Loch Fyne. Both clans were fiercely loyal to the Scottish crown. After the Campbell chief became the Earl of Argyll, the MacLachlans stayed true friends, even fighting on the Earl of Argyll's behalf. At the end of the 17th century and the start of the Jacobite Rising, this changed. The traitorous Campbells followed the new regime, while the MacLachlans stayed true to Scotland and the Stuart kings. They fought at Killiecrankie and against the Campbells at Sheriff Muir. Even in the face of defeat, they held on to their lands and Old Castle Lachlan. When Bonnie Prince Charlie landed in Scotland in 1745 to rouse the clans, many of them wavered. Lachlan MacLachlan, the 17th chief, asked advice from the wisest person he knew. Master Harry, a brownie, a small, mysterious, supernatural creature living in the depths of the castle. Master Harry was distressed when Lachlan found him. The brownie explained he had seen a stranger arrive in the north, and nothing good would come of it. He was adamant this stranger would lead his beloved master, Chief of Clan MacLachlan, to his death. This news damaged Lachlan, as he knew the brownie was really wrong. He knew what his clan expected of him, and even knowing it may spell his doom, he answered the prince's call. Gathering over 100 MacLachlan men, he marched away to join the Jacobite army. Passing the chapel of Kilmorey, knowing his fate, Lachlan stopped to pray while surrounded by his ancestors. He remounted his horse, a magnificent white stallion. It shuffled uneasily and turned around 3 times anti-clockwise. A terrible omen that the chief would never return to his home. The MacLachlans joined the rising all the way back to Culloden. During the carnage of that final battle, Lachlan MacLachlan, leading his men on horseback, was struck from his saddle by a cannonball to die on the battlefield. The first sign of this tragedy to reach Old Castle Lachlan was the chief's riderless horse. It is said to have found its way home swimming across Loch Fyne to reach the castle alone. Soon after the battle, an English warship sailed up Loch Fyne and bombarded the castle, reducing it to the lonely ruin we see today. No MacLachlan would live inside those walls again. but the old chief's horse refused to leave. It spent the rest of its days pining away in the old stable, no doubt being consoled by Master Harry, the ever-faithful brownie. They say it can be sometimes heard in the bolts of the ruin and seen in the moonlight, ever waiting for Lachlan McLachlan to return home.
Excellent. Enjoyed that. Excellent. Thank you, David.
There you go, John. I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, I certainly did, sir.
Bless you. Now you
Yeah,
can see what we look at on every day, what we're lucky enough to look at on. Beautiful sight.
this indeed.
Got another quick one, if you want a quick one from my childhood. Bit of a
Go ahead.
spooky one.
Yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
I'm sure you've seen the series Our Freezer's Ain't Pet. Did you watch the second series, Return of the Seven?
No.
You didn't. Well, in
No.
the first episode of that show, it was some of it was filmed in Beeston, Nottingham. It wasn't Birmingham like they said in the show, where they were doing up Barry's house. They all met him at Barry's house, doing it up. Well, a friend of mine from school used to live in that house, and in primary school, I can remember having a couple of days off school. When he returned, he explained why. And he was saying that one evening, one of his sisters was sleeping in the bed on the top floor of the house. And she was awakened by an old lady telling her to get out of the house as it was on fire. And she ran downstairs and woke everyone, including Matthew, my friend, and they all got out. They didn't have a clue who she was. There was no old woman living there in the house. But they all got out. The house was burnt right through. And that's where you see it on the first series when they're doing it up. That's the same house.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah, a bit of a spooky one.
Yeah, very interesting.
A nice one, though.
Yes. Positive, which is good.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you get on with the rest of the evening, John. I'll enjoy sitting back enjoying it.
Well, thank you for your contribution.
No, it's been great so far, John. I'm loving it.
Good.
Well, it's been an honour. Hope you enjoyed it.
Glad of that. I'm glad of
I can get back and enjoy chat now.
Well, I have to pick something else to go on. So, as you all seem to really enjoy,
Did anybody notice the Tonic's tea cake on my knee? Did anybody pick that up?
don't know.
Right. You won't, this time of year, if you're in the Highlands, especially when you're around the locks, you've got to watch out for the odd haggis roaming around because they can be voracious before they go into hibernation. So a Tonic's tea cake, they'll do the job. You can run then. If you've got haggai, as in a group of haggis, then you're better off with a bottle of wine brew or a box of Tonics because they're voracious.
Okay, go. Oh, there's somebody there I want to speak to. Tight Scotsman, thank you very much for your kind donation, sir. I should have thanked you earlier, but things go out of my mind and come in, and that's when I went out. So, there he's gone. So, as you all seem to have enjoyed the Dracula, what I will do then is I'll play you the second part. Why am I not there? Why am I got Tight Scotsman there? What have I done wrong? I've done something wrong, folks. Yeah, that's better. So, we'll try again, shall we? So here we go, folks. This is the second part of Dracula.
The 5th of May. The castle. The grey of the morning has passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seems jagged, whether with trees or hills, I know not, for it is so far off that big things and little are mixed. I am not sleepy, and as I am not to be called till I awake, naturally I will write till sleep comes. There are many odd things to put down, and least who reads them may fancy that I dined too well before I left Blinsk. Let me put down my dinner exactly. I dined on what they call robber steak, bits of bacon, onion and beef, seasoned with red pepper and strung on sticks and roasted over the fire, in the simple style of the London cat's meat. The wine was golden Madeira, which produces a queer sting on the tongue, which is, however, not disagreeable. I had only a couple of glasses of this and nothing else. When I got on the coach, the driver had not taken his seat, and I saw him talking with the landlady. They were evidently talking of me, for every now and then they looked at me, and some of the people who were sitting on the bench outside the door, which they call by a name meaning word-bearer, came and listened, and then looked at me, most of them pityingly. I could hear a lot of words often repeated, queer words, for there were many nationalities in the crowd, so I quietly got out my polyglot dictionary from my bag and looked them out. I must say, they were not cheering to me, for among them were Satan, hell, witch, and something that means either werewolf or vampire. Memo: I must ask the Count about these superstitions. When we started, the crowd round the inn door, which had by this time swelled to a comfortable size, all made the sign of the cross and pointed 2 fingers towards me. With some difficulty, I got a fellow passenger to tell me what they meant. He would not answer at first, But on learning that I was English, he explained that this was a sign or charm against the evil eye. This was not very pleasant for me, for just starting for an unknown place, to meet an unknown man. But everyone seemed so kind-hearted and so sorrowful and so sympathetic that I could not but be touched. I shall never forget the last glimpse which I had of the courtyard and its crowd of picturesque figures, all crossing themselves as they stood in the wide archway with its background of rich foliage of oleander and orange trees in green tubs clustered in the centre of the yard. Then our driver, whose wide linen drawers covered the whole front of the box seat, Gotza, they call them, cracked his big whip over his 4 small horses, which ran abreast, and we set off on our journey. I soon lost sight and recollections of ghostly fears in the beauty of the scene as we drove along, although, had I known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to throw them off so easily. Before us lay a green sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills, crowned with clumps of trees, or with farmhouses, the blank gabled end to the road. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom, apple, plum, pear, cherry, and as we drove by I could see the green grass under the trees spangled with the fallen petals. In and out amongst these green hills of what they call here the Mittelland ran the road, losing itself as it swept round the grassy curve, or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods, which here and there ran down the hillside like tongues of flame. The road was rugged, but still we seemed to fly over it with a feverish haste. I could not understand then what the haste meant, but the driver was evidently bent on losing no time in reaching Bordeaux-Prund. I was told that this road is, in summertime, excellent, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. In this respect, it is different from the general run of roads in the Carpathians, for it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. Beyond the green swelling hills of the Mittelland rose mighty slopes of forest up to the lofty steps of the Carpathians themselves. Right and left of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them, and bringing out all the glorious colours of this beautiful range, deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peaks, green and brown where grass and rock mingled, and an endless perspective of ragged rock and pointed crags, till these were themselves lost in the distance, where the snowy peaks rose grandly. Here and there seemed mighty rifts in the mountains, through which, as the sun began to sink, we saw now and again the white gleam of falling water. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of a hill and opened up the lofty, snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we wound our serpentine way, to be right in front of us.
Look, this is
As we wound on our endless way, and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to creep around us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountain top still held the sunset and seemed to glow out with a delicate, cool pink. By the roadside were many crosses, and as we swept by, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman kneeling before a shrine, who did not even turn round as we approached, but seemed, in the self-surrender of devotion, to have neither eyes nor ears for the outer world. There were many things new to me. For instance, hayricks in the trees, and here and there very beautiful masses of weeping birch, their white stems shining like silver through the delicate green of the leaves. Now and again we passed a litter wagon, the ordinary peasant's cart, with its long, snake-like vertebrae, calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. On this were sure to be seated many groups of homecoming peasants, the Czechs with their white, and the Slovaks with their coloured sheepskins, the latter carrying lance fashion their long staffs, with axe at end. As the evening fell, it began to get very cold, and the growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness, the gloom of the trees, oak, birch and pine. Though in the valleys, which ran deep between the spurs of the hills as we ascended through the pass, the dark firs stood out, here and there, against the background of lakeland snow. Sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods that seemed in the darkness to be closing down upon us, great masses of greyness, which here and there bestrewed the trees, produced a peculiarly weird and solemn effect, which carried on the thoughts and grim fancies engendered earlier in the evening, when the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds which amongst the Carpathians seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. Sometimes the hills were so steep that despite our driver's haste, the horses could only go slowly. I wished to get down and walk up them as we do at home, but the driver would not hear of it.
Nein, nein, zij müssen doch nicht laufen. Die Hunde sind so wütend.
And then he added, with what he evidently meant for grim pleasantry, for he looked round to catch the approving smile of the rest.
Und vielleicht haben zij gerne von solchen Dingen, derwijl zij schlafen kunnen.
The only stop he would make was for a moment's pause to light his lamps. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement amongst the passengers, and we kept speaking to him, one after the other, as though urging him to further speed. He lashed the horses unmercifully with his long whip, and with wild cries of encouragement urged them on to further exertions. Then through the darkness, I could see a sort of patch of grey light ahead of us, as though there were a cleft in the hill. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. The crazy coach rocked on its great leather springs and swayed like a boat tossed on a stormy sea. I had to hold on. The road grew more level, and we appeared to fly along. Then the mountains seemed to come nearer to us on each side and to frown down upon us. We were entering on Bordeaux Pass. One by one, several of the passengers offered me gifts, which they pressed upon me with an earnestness which would take no denial. These were certainly of an odd and varied kind, but each was given in simple good faith, with a kindly word and a blessing, and that strange mixture of fear-meaning movements which I had seen outside the hotel at Blinsk, the sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye. Then, as we flew along, the driver leaned forward, and on each side the passengers, craning over the edge of the coach, peered eagerly into the darkness. It was evident that something very exciting was either happening or expected. But though I asked each passenger, no one would give me the slightest explanation. This state of excitement kept on for some little time, and at last we saw before us the pass opening out on the eastern side. There were dark rolling clouds overhead, and in the air the heavy oppressive sense of thunder. It seemed as though the mountain range had separated two atmospheres, and that now we had got into the thunderous one. I was now myself looking out for the conveyance which would take me to the Count. Each moment I expected to see the glare of lamps through the blackness, but all was dark. The only light was the flickering rays of our own lamps, in which the steam from our hard-driven horses rose in a white cloud. We could now see the sandy road lying white before us. There was on it no sign of a vehicle. The passengers drew back with a sigh of gladness which seemed to mock my disappointment. I was already thinking what I had best do, when the driver, looking at his watch, said to the others something which I could hardly hear. It was spoken so quietly and in so low a tone. I thought it was. Then turning to me, he said in German worse than my own,
Es gibt keine Kutsche hier. Der Herr ist also nicht erwartet. Wird jetzt müssen kommen und morgen oder übermorgen zurückkommen.
Whilst he was speaking, the horses began to neigh and snort and plunge wildly, so that the driver had to hold them up. Then, amongst a chorus of screams from the peasants and a universal crossing of themselves, a caleche with 4 horses drove up behind us, overtook us, and drew up beside the coach. I could see from the flash of our lamps, as the rays fell on them, that the horses were coal-black and splendid animals. They were driven by a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight as he turned to us. He said to the driver,
Abendflug, my friend.
The man stammered in reply.
Der englische Herr hatte es eilig.
To which the stranger replied,
Das ist es. Nimm ich an, Vorüberschiefer, du das englische Herr mit Ihnen. Sie kennen mich, Patron, my friend. Ich weiß so viel und mein Herr
Smell.
As he spoke, he smiled, and the lamplight fell on a hard-looking mouth with very red lips and sharp-looking teeth as white as ivory. One of my companions whispered to another the line from Burger's Leonore.
Denn die Toten reiten schnell.
The strange driver evidently heard the words, for he looked up with a gleaming smile. The passenger turned his face away, at the same time putting out his 2 fingers and crossing himself.
Kevin sa jobdas gitek von herren.
My bags were handed out and put in the caliche. Then I descended from the side of the coach as the caliche was close alongside, the driver helping me with a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel. His strength must have been prodigious. Without a word, he shook the reins. The horses turned, and we were swept into the darkness of the pass. As I looked back, I saw the steam from the horses of the coach by the light of the lamps, and projected against it the figures of my late companions crossing themselves. Then the driver cracked his whip and called to his horses, and off they swept on their way to Bucklinia. As they sank into the darkness, I felt a strange chill, and a lonely feeling came over me. But a cloak was thrown over my shoulders and a rug across my knees, and the driver said,
Die Nacht ist kalt, mein Herr. Und mein Meister, der Graf, hat nie befohlen, uns hier zu kümmern.
I felt a little strange and not a little frightened. I think that, had there been any alternative, I should have taken it, instead of prosecuting that unknown night journey. The carriage went at a hard pace straight along, then we made a complete turn and went along another straight road. It seemed to me that we were simply going over and over the same ground again. So I made note of some salient point and found that this was so. I would have liked to have asked the driver what all this meant, but I really feared to do so, for I thought that, placed as I was, any protest would have had no effect in case there had been an intention to delay. By and by, however, I was curious to know how time was passing. I struck a match, and by its flame looked at my watch. It was within a few minutes of midnight. This gave me a sort of shock, for I suppose the general superstition about midnight was increased by my recent experiences. I waited with a sick feeling of suspense. In a few minutes, however, my own ears got accustomed to the sound, and the horses so far became quiet that the driver was able to descend and stand before them. He petted and soothed them and whispered something in their ears, as I have heard horse trainers doing, with extraordinary effect. For under his caresses, the horses became quite manageable again, though they still trembled. The driver again took his seat, and shaking his reins, started off at a great pace. This time, after going to the far side of the pass, he suddenly turned down a narrow roadway, which ran sharply to the right. Soon we were hemmed in with trees, which in places arched right over the roadway till we passed through a tunnel. And again, great frowning rocks guarded us boldly on either side. Though we were in shelter, We could hear the rising wind, for it moaned and whistled through the rocks, and the branches of the trees crashed together as we swept along. It grew colder and colder still, and fine powdery snow began to fall, so that soon we and all around us were covered with a white blanket. The keen wind still carried the howling of the dogs, though this grew fainter as we went on our way. The baying of the wolves sounded nearer and nearer, as though they were closing round us on every side. I grew dreadfully afraid, and the horses shared my fear. But the driver was not in the least disturbed. He kept turning his head to left and right, but I could see nothing through the darkness. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint, flickering blue flame. The driver saw it at the same time. He at once checked the horses and, jumping to the ground, disappeared into the darkness. I did not know what to do. The less as the howling of the wolves grew closer. But while I wondered, the driver suddenly appeared again, and without a word took his seat, and we resumed our journey. I think I must have fallen asleep and kept dreaming of the incident, for it seemed to be repeated endlessly. And now, looking back, it is like a sort of awful nightmare. Once the flame appeared so near the road that even in the darkness around us I could watch the driver's motions. He went rapidly to where the blue flame arose. It must have been very faint, for it did not seem to illuminate the place around it at all, and gathering a few stones formed them into some device. Once there appeared a strange optical effect. When he stood between me and the flame, he did not obstruct it, for I could see its ghostly figure all the same. This startled me, but as the effect was only momentary, I took it that my eyes deceived me, straining through the darkness. Then for a time there were no blue flames, and we sped onward through the gloom, with the howling of the wolves around us, as though they were following us in a moving circle. At last, there came a time when the driver went further afield than he had yet done, and during his absence, the horses began to tremble worse than ever, and snort and scream with fright. I could see no cause for it, for the howling of the wolves had ceased altogether. But just then, the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind the jagged crest of beetling, pine-clad rock, and by its light I saw around us a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They were 100 times more terrible in the grim silence which held them than they had ever been howling. For myself, I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. It is only when a man feels himself face to face with such horrors that he can understand their true import. All at once the wolves began to howl, as though the moonlight had had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jumped about and reared, and looked helplessly around them with eyes that rolled in a way painful to see. but the living ring of terror encompassed them on every side, and they had perforce to remain within it. I called to the coachman to come, for it seemed to me that our only chance was to try and break out through the ring and to aid his approach. I shouted and beat the side of the caleche, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from that side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there, I do not know, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command, and looking towards the sound, saw him stand in the roadway. As he swept his long arms as though brushing aside some impalpable obstacle, the wolves fell back, and back further still. Just then a heavy cloud passed across the face of the moon, so that we were again in darkness. When I could see again, the driver was climbing into the caleche and the wolves had disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed interminable as we swept on our way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. We kept on ascending, with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main, always ascending. Suddenly, I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky.
I hope you enjoyed that. Would you like to hear part 3, which is, in fact, the last part that I recorded? Or have you had and heard enough? Woodlander, you're still enjoying it. Would you like to hear the last part? Yes, no hesitation. Thank you. Thank you. That's what makes it all worthwhile, of course, as you well know. More hashtag says. Well, who am I to deny my audience? Okay. Let's see if I did everything correct. I had it. Okay. So this is the third and last part that I was able to record because of lack of personnel, folks. So Enjoy.
The 5th of May continued. I must have been asleep, for certainly if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach to such a remarkable place. And the gloomy courtyard looked of considerable size, and the several dark ways led from it, and their great stone arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I have not yet been able to see it by daylight. When the caleche stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Again, I could not but notice his prodigious strength. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. Then he took out my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to a great door, old and studded with large iron nails, and set in a projecting doorway of massive stone. I could see, even in the dim light, that the door was massively carved, but that the carvings had been worn away by time and weather. As I stood, the driver jumped again into his seat and shook the reins. The horses started forward, and trap and all disappeared down one of the dark openings. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. Of bell or knocker there was no sign. Through those frowning walls and dark window openings, it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to? And among what kind of people? What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? Solicitor's clerk? Mina would not like that. Solicitor, for just before leaving London, I got word that my examination was successful, and I am now a full-blown solicitor. I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I were awake. for it all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me, and I expected that I should suddenly awake and find myself at home with the dawn struggling in through the windows, as I had now and again felt in the morning after a day of overwork. But my flesh answered the pinching test, and my eyes were not to be deceived. I was indeed awake and among the Carpathians. All I could do now was to be patient and wait the coming of the morning. Just as I had come to this conclusion, I heard the heavy step approaching behind the great door, and saw, through the chinks, the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned, with the loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven save for a long white moustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of colour about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burned without chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation,
"Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own free will."
He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand, grasped mine with a strength which made me winch, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man. Again he said,
"Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring."
The strength of the handshake was so much akin to that which I had noticed in the driver, whose face I had not seen, that for a moment I doubted if it were not the same person to whom I was speaking. So, to make sure, I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?"
"I am Dracula."
He bowed in a courtly way.
"Come in. The night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest."
As he was speaking, he put the lamp on a bracket on the wall, and stepping out, took my luggage. He had carried it in before I could forestall him. I protested, but he insisted.
"Nay, sir, you are my guest. It is late, and my people are not yet available."
He insisted on carrying my traps along the passage, and then up a great winding stair, and along another great passage, on whose stone floor our steps rang heavily. At the end of this, he threw open a heavy door, and I rejoiced to see within a well-lit room in which a table was spread for supper, and on whose mighty hearth a great fire of logs flamed and flared. The Count halted, putting down my bags, closed the door, and crossing the room opened another door, which led into a small octagonal room lit by a single lamp, and seemingly without a window of any sort. Passing through this, he opened another door and motioned me to enter. It was a welcome sight, for here was a great bedroom well lighted and warmed with another log fire, which sent a hollow sound up a wide chimney. The Count himself left my luggage inside and withdrew, saying, before he closed the door,
You will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilet. I trust you will find all you wish. When you are ready to come into the other room, where you will find your supper prepared.
The light and warmth of the Count's courteous welcome seemed to have dissipated all my fears and doubts. Having then reached my normal state, I discovered that I was half famished with hunger. So making a hasty toilet, I went into the other room. I found my supper already laid out. My host, who stood to one side of the great fireplace, leaning against the stonework, made a graceful wave of his hand to the table and said,
I pray you be seated and sup as you please. You will, I trust. Excuse me that I do not join you. I have dined already, and I do not sup.
I handed to him the sealed envelope which Mr. Hawkins had entrusted to me. He opened it and read it gravely. Then, with a charming smile, he handed it to me to read. One passage of it, at least, gave me a thrill of pleasure.
I much regret that an attack of gout, from which I am a constant sufferer, forbids absolutely any travelling on my part for some time to come. But I am happy to say I can send a sufficient substitute, one in whom I have every confidence. He is a young man, full of energy and talent in his own way, and of a very faithful disposition. He is discreet and silent, and has grown into manhood in my service. He shall be ready to attend on you when you will during his stay, and shall take your instructions in all matters.
The Count himself came forward and took off the cover of a dish, and I fell to at once on the excellent roast chicken. This, with some cheese and a salad and a bottle of old Touquet, of which I had 2 glasses, was my supper. During the time I was eating it, the Count asked many questions as to my journey, and I told him by degrees all that I had experienced. By this time, I had finished my supper, and by my host's desire had drawn up a chair by the fire and begun to smoke a cigar which he had offered me, at the same time excusing himself that he did not smoke. I had now an opportunity of observing him, and found him of a very marked appearance. His face was a very strong aquiline, with high bridge of the thin nose and peculiarly arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead, and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, as far as I could see it under the heavy moustache, was fixed and rather cruel-looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable readiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale and at the tops extremely pointed. The chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm, though thin. The general effect was one of extraordinary pallor. Hitherto I had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they had seemed rather white and fine, but seeing them now close to me, I could not but notice that they were rather coarse, broad, with squat fingers. Strange to say, there were hairs in the centre of the palm. The nails were long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over me and his hands touched me, I could not repress a shudder. It may have been that his breath was rank, but a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which, do what I would, I could not conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back, and with a grim sort of smile, which showed more than he had yet done his protrudent teeth, sat himself down again on his side of the fireplace. We both sat silent for a while, and as I looked towards the window I saw the first dim streak of the coming dawn. There seemed a strange stillness over everything, but as I listened, I heard, as if from down in the valley, the howling of many wolves. The Count's eyes gleamed and he said,
Listen to them. The children of the night. What music they make.
Seeing, I suppose, some expression in my face strange to him, he added,
Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city, you cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter.
Then he rose and said,
But you must be tired. Your bedroom is all ready, and tomorrow you shall sleep as you should. I have to be awake till the afternoon. So sleep well, I'm doing well.
And with a courteous bow, he opened for me himself the door to the octagonal room, and I entered my bedroom. I am all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. God, keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me. Seventh of May. It is again early morning, but I have rested and enjoyed the last 24 hours. I slept late in the day and awoke of my own accord. When I had dressed myself, I went into the room where we had supped and found a cold breakfast laid out, with coffee kept hot by the pot being placed on the hearth. There was a card on the table on which was written,
I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me.
So I set to and enjoyed a hearty meal. When I had done, I looked for a bell so that I might let the servants know I had finished, but I could not find one. There are certainly odd deficiencies in the house, considering the extraordinary evidence of wealth which are around me. The table service is of gold, and so beautifully wrought that it must be of immense value. The curtains and upholstery of the chairs and sofas and the hangings of my bed are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics, and must have been of fabulous value when they were made, for they are centuries old, though in excellent order. I saw something like them in Hampton Court, but there they were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. But still, in none of the rooms is there a mirror. There is not even a toilet glass on my table, and I had to get the little shaving glass from my bag before I could either shave or brush my hair. I have not yet seen a servant anywhere, or heard a sound near the castle except the howling of wolves. When I had finished my meal, I do not know whether to call it a breakfast or dinner, for it was between 5 and 6 o'clock when I had it. I looked about for something to read, for I did not like to go about the castle until I had asked the Count's permission. There was absolutely nothing in the room, book, newspaper, or even writing materials. So I opened another door in the room and found a sort of library. The door opposite mine I tried, but found it locked. In the library I found, to my great delight, a vast number of English books, whole shelves full of them, and bound volumes of magazines and newspapers. A table in the centre was littered with English magazines and newspapers, though none of them were of very recent date. The books were of the most varied kind: history, geography, politics, political economy, botany, geology, law, all relating to England, and English life and customs and manners. There were even such books of reference such as the London Directory, the Red and Blue Books, Whitaker's Almanac, the Army and Navy lists, and it somehow gladdened my heart to see it, the law list. Whilst I was looking at the books, the door opened and the Count entered. He saluted me in a hearty way and hoped that I had had a good night's rest. Then he went on,
I am glad that you found your way in here, for I am sure there is much that will interest you. These friends,
and he laid his hand on some of the books.
these friends have been good friends to me, and for some months past, ever since I had the idea of going to London, have given me many happy hours of pleasure. Through them I have come to know your great England, and to know how is to love her. I long to go through the crowded streets of your mighty London, to be in the midst of the will and the rush of humanity, to share its life, its change, its death, and all that makes it what it is. But alas, as yet, I only know your tongue through books. To you, my friend, I look that I know it to speak.
But Count, you know and speak English thoroughly. He bowed gravely.
I thank you, my friend, for your all too flattering estimate. Yet I fear that I am but the little way up the road that I would travel. True, I know the grammar and the words, but yet I know not how to speak them.
Indeed, you speak excellently.
Not so. Well, I know that. Did I move and speak in your London? None there are who would not know me for a stranger. That is not enough for me. I am Boyar. The common people know me, and I am master. But the stranger in a strange land, he is no one. Men know him not, and to know not is to care not for. I am content if I am like the rest, so that no man stops if he sees me, or pauses in his speaking if he hears my words, to say, he is a stranger. I have been so long master that I would be master still, or at least that none other should be master of me. You come to me not alone as agent of my friend Peter Hawkins of Exeter to tell me all about my mistake in London. You shall, I trust, rest here with me a while, so that by our talking I may learn the English intonations, and I would that you tell me when I make error, even of the smallest, in my speaking. I am sorry that I had to be away so long today, but you will, I know, forgive one who has so many important affairs in hand.
Of course, I said all I could about being willing, and asked if I might come into that other room when I chose. He answered,
Yes, certainly, young widow, anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you will not wish to go. There is a reason that all things are as they are. And did you see with my eyes, and know with my knowledge, you would perhaps better understand
I said I was sure of this, and then he went on.
You're in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things. Nay, from what you have told me of your experiences already, you know something of what strange things here may be.
This led to much conversation, and as it was evident that he wanted to talk, if only for talking's sake, I asked him many questions regarding things that had already happened to me or come within my notice. Sometimes he veered off the subject or turned the conversation by pretending not to understand, but in the main he answered all I asked most frankly. Then as time went on, and I had got somewhat bolder, I asked him of some of the strange things of the preceding night, as for instance, why the coachman went to the places where we had seen the blue flames. Was it indeed true that they showed where gold was hidden? Then he explained to me that it was commonly believed that on a certain night of the year, last night in fact, when all evil spirits are supposed to have unchecked sway, a blue flame is seen over any place where treasure has been concealed.
That treasure has been hidden in the region through which you came last night. There can be little doubt, for it was the ground fought over for centuries. Why, there is hardly a foot of soil in all this region that has not been enriched by the blood of men, patriots or invaders. In the old days, there were sterling times when Austrian and the Hungarian came up in hordes, and the patriots went out to meet them. Men and women, the aged and the children too, and waited their coming on the rocks above the passes, that they might sweep destruction on them with their artificial avalanches. When the invader was triumphant, he found but little. For whatever there had been, sheltered in the friendly soil.
But how can it have remained so long undiscovered, when there is a sure index to it, if men will but take the trouble to look? The Count smiled, and as his lips ran back over his gums, the long, sharp, canine teeth showed out strangely. He answered,
Because your peasant is at heart a coward and a fool. Those flames only appear on one night, and that night no man in this land will, if he can help it, stir without his doors. And, dear sir, even if he did, he would not know what to do. Why, even if the peasant that you tell me of, who marked the place of the flame, would not know where to look in daylight, even for his work. You would not, I dare be sworn, be able to find these places again.
There you are right. I know no more than the dead where even to look for them. Then we drifted onto other matters.
Come, tell me of London and of the house which you have procured for me.
With an apology for my reminiscence, I went into my own room to get the papers from my bag. Whilst I was placing them in order, I heard a rattling of china and silver in the next room, and as I passed through, noticed that the table had been cleared and the lamp lit, for it was by this time deep into the dark. The lamps were also lit in the study or library, and I found the Count lying on the sofa, reading of all things in the world, an English Bradshaw's Guide. When I came in, he cleared the books and papers from the table, and with him I went into plans and deeds and figures of all sorts. He was interested in everything, and asked me a myriad questions about the place and its surroundings. He clearly had studied beforehand all he could get on the subject of the neighbourhood, for he was evidently at the end, knew very much more than I did. When I remarked this, he answered,
Well, but my friend, is it not needful that I should, when I go there, I shall be alone, and my hearty Jonathan, nay, beg your pardon, for I fall into my country's habit of putting your family name first. My friend Jonathan Harker will not be by my side to correct me and heed me. He will be in Exeter, miles away, probably working on papers of the law with my other friend, Peter Hawkins. So
We went thoroughly into the business of the purchase of the estate at Purefleet. When I had told him the facts and got his signature to the necessary papers, and had written a letter with them ready to post to Mr. Hawkins, he began to ask me how I had come across so suitable a place. I read to him the notes which I had made at the time, and which I inscribe here at Purefleet. On a by-road, I came across just such a place as seemed to be required, and where was displayed a dilapidated notice that the place was for sale. It is surrounded by a high wall of ancient structure built of heavy stones, and has not been repaired for a large number of years. The closed gates were of heavy old oak and iron, all eaten with rust. The estate is called Carfax, no doubt a corruption of the old Quartry face, as the house is four-sided, agreeing with the cardinal points of the compass. It contains, in all, some 20 acres, quite surrounded by the solid stone wall above mentioned. There are many trees on it, which make it in places gloomy, and there is a deep, dark-looking pond or small lake, evidently fed by some springs, as the water is clear and flows away in a fair-sized stream. The house is very large, and of all periods back, I should say, to medieval times, for one part is of stone immensely thick, and only a few windows high up and heavily barred with iron. It looks like part of a keep, and is close to an old chapel or church. I could not enter it, as I had not the key of the door leading to it from the house. But I have taken, with my Kodak, views of it from various points. The house has been added to, but in a very straggling way, and I can only guess at the amount of ground it covers, which must be very great. There are but few houses close at hand, one being a very large house, only recently added to and formed into a private lunatic asylum. It is not, however, visible from the grounds. When I had finished, he said,
I am glad that it is old and big. I myself am of an old family and to live in a new house would kill me. A house cannot be made habitat in a day. And after all, how few days go to make up a century. I rejoice in that there is a chapel of old times. We dance of funny nobles. Think not that our bones should be amongst the common dead. I seek not gaiety nor mirth, not the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling water which pleases the young and gay. I am no longer young, and my heart, through weary years of mourning the dead, is not attuned to mirth, moreover. The walls of my castle are broken. The shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and the shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I'm me.
Somehow, his words and his look did not seem to accord, or else it was that his cast of face made his smile look malignant and saturnine. Presently, with an excuse, he left me, asking me to put all my papers together. He was some little time away, and I began to look at some of the books around me. One was an atlas, which I found opened naturally at England, as if that map had been much used. On looking at it, I found in certain places little rings marked, and on examining these, I noticed that one was near London on the east side, manifestly where his new estate was situated. The other two were Exeter and Whitby on the Yorkshire coast. It was the better part of an hour when the Count returned.
Still at your boots. Good. But you must not work always. Come, I am informed that your supper is
took my arm and we went into the next room, where I found an excellent supper ready on the table. The Count again excused himself, as he had dined out on his being away from home. But he sat, as the previous night, and chatted whilst I ate. After supper I smoked, as on the last evening, and the Count stayed with me, chatting and asking questions on every conceivable subject, hour after hour. I felt that it was getting very late indeed, but I did not say anything, for I felt under obligation to meet my host's wishes in every way. I was not sleepy, as the long sleep yesterday had fortified me, but I could not help experiencing that chill which comes over one at the coming of the dawn, which is like, in its way, the turn of the tide. They say that people who are near death die generally at the change to the dawn or the turn of the tide. Anyone who has, when tired and tied as it were to his post, experienced this change in the atmosphere can well believe it. All at once we heard the crow of a cock coming up with perennial shrillness through the clear morning air. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, said,
Why, there is the morning air. How remiss am I to let you stay up so long. You must make your conversations regarding my dear new country of England less interesting, so that I may not forget how time flies by us.
and with a courtly bow he left me. I went into my own room and drew the curtains, but there was little to notice. My window opened into the courtyard. All I could see was the warm grey of quickening sky. So I pulled the curtains again, and have written of this day, 8th of May. I began to fear as I wrote in this book that I was getting too diffuse. But now I am glad that I went into detail from the first, for there is something so strange about this place and all in it that I cannot but feel uneasy. I wish I were safe out of it, or that I had never come. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on me, but would that were all. If there were anyone to talk to, I could bear it, but there is no one. I have only the Count to speak with, and he. I fear I am the only living soul within the place. Let me be prosaic as far as the facts can be. It will help me to bear up, and imagination must not run riot with me. If it does, I am lost. Let me say at once how I stand, or seem to. I only slept for a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep any more, got up. I had hung my shaving glass by the window, and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to me. I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection of the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me, and I could see him over my shoulder, but there was no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of a man in it, except myself. This was startling, and coming on top of so many strange things, was beginning to increase that vague feeling of uneasiness which I always have when the Count is near. But at that instant, I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin. I laid down the razor, turning as I did, so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with a sort of demonic fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there.
Take care. Take care how you cut yourself. It is more dangerous than you think in this country.
Then, seizing the shaving glass, he went on.
And this is the wretched thing that has done the mischief. It is the foul powder of man's vanity. Away with it.
And opening the heavy window with one wrench of his terrible hand, he flung out the glass, which was shattered into 1,000 pieces on the stones of the courtyard far below. Then he withdrew, without a word. It is very annoying, for I do not see how I am to shave, unless in my watch case, or the bottom of the shaving pot, which is, fortunately, of metal. When I went into the dining room, breakfast was prepared, but I could not find the Count anywhere, so I breakfasted alone. It is strange that, as yet, I have not seen the Count eat or drink. He must be a very peculiar man. After breakfast, I did a little exploring in the castle. I went out onto the stairs and found a room looking towards the south. The view was magnificent, and from where I stood, there was every opportunity of seeing it. The castle is on the very edge of a terrible precipice. A stone falling from the window would fall 1,000 feet without touching anything. As far as the eye can reach is a sea of green treetops, with occasionally a deep rift where there is a chasm. Here and there are silver threads where the rivers wind in deep gorges through the forests. But I am not in heart to describe beauty, For when I had seen the view, I explored further. Doors, 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 doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place, save from the windows in the castle walls, are there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner.
Okay, doke, Toffee. I've already got one from her, so if you're talking about a second one, that would be a new one. But I have seen the first one and read it. But thanks, Toffee, for letting me know. Well, folks, I'm going to put on the light now. I hope you all enjoyed this evening's Halloween stream. That presentation was put out there you go. Do you like the hat? I'm glad you all enjoyed it. That's the main thing. Maybe next year I'll let you hear my full Jekyll and Hyde. Let me have a quick look, Toffee. This is a smoking kit, by the way. Well, I don't see a second one, Toffee. But I did see and read the first one. I wasn't sure if it needed a reply or not. Well, I'll give her a reply. Not a problem. No, I don't see a budget. There's a phase. It's a real one. Oh, it took a while to do all that, of course. You don't throw something like that up in an hour. Silliest poetry. Remember on Monday night I've got Scots Armour on. And I've got I've got sent some short story there. If I could find your poem, it would be an easier thing to do than the short story, of course. Well, I don't seem to see it at the present moment. Listen, Silius, in the off chance that I've messed up at my end, could you please send it again to me? I promise I will read it and just find it. It's like sensims here. Well, it was one of those things that it was bought too late. It was bought sadly after Jerry died. It was so that we would each have one and we would. Is it? Oh, God. It shouldn't be. It should be. Should be Monday. Oh, Friday. Friday the 1st. Or is it Tuesday the 5th? Oh, God. Yeah, please, Celeste, try it again. Oh. I see that it's down for tomorrow, I said so. I've got it down twice. Once for tomorrow and once for Monday. I've even got a question mark at it, questioning myself. So somewhere along the line I've screwed up again. It's going to be a habit. Tuesday. I'll check his email, and obviously, if I'm on, I'll set it up so you'll know. I glow. Time to hit the pillow. I have to pay taxes for me, for my and your lot replacement. Thank you, John. You're welcome. I'll check that, said some. Thanks for drawing it to my attention. And I will read your poem, obviously I will. Oh, age does not come alone. That's a brilliant piece you sent me, with a little animation and music. Brilliant. I'll hold on to that, of course. That's for sure. I'm glad you all enjoyed tonight's stream. You as well, Trebleheim. I hope you enjoyed it. A drape coat. You like that, do you? I suppose I better get some music. We'll close up. Aye. Do-la-ba. Red Fez. I think I've seen that joke, Streety. Wee curtain rail. Yeah. Well, David, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed your piece as well, of course. You know, once you got the old sound sorted out. Yes, it's a smoking cap to go with the smoking jacket. You see, that's what it is. I shall try and sort out exactly where I'm speaking to Scots Harbour. I thought it was Monday. I thought I'd left myself space, but obviously I could have screwed that up. So anyway, Good to see you all here. I appreciate that. It makes the effort worthwhile, of course. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Treble M. And thanks for being here. It's a new name for me. I don't suck all life. There's William. Hello there, William. Oh yeah, I'll call it quits and see if I can find where I'm supposed to be speaking to Scots Harbour. I get worse, I tell you. So this is Thursday, so I can be back tomorrow. Anyway, as soon as I've got that straightened out, I shall put up a notification so nobody gets confused. So take care, folks. And again, thanks very much for being here. You know, I made several tests for that voice for Dracula, and I had said, mainly to my two friends, you know, Jerry and my other friend, if I don't come up with a voice for Dracula that I don't think works, then I will not be doing this. So I recorded a couple of different voices and I tested it out with my friends. And they both agreed that the one you heard tonight was the most successful. So there you go, folks. It's not something, of course, that I can do on a live performance. It's very difficult to get my natural voice down there. So I had to do it piece by piece. Anyway, I may not see you tomorrow, and I may see you tomorrow. I'll check out. As soon as I know, I'll put a notification up, folks, so you know. So if it isn't tomorrow night, it'll be Monday. But I'll check it first. Okie doke. And thanks for being here. Glad you enjoyed it. So enjoy the music.
Silently the snow falls, paints a winter scene, swiftly spreads the dark rim, hides a fading autumn green. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, conjure friendships dear to me. Lightly now the breeze flows, disturbing more than just the leaves. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow. Patiently the love grows, lifts the weary heart. Gently now she holds me, melts two worlds once apart. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, usher dreams of you and me. Softly then the breeze blows, disturbing more than just the trees.
All together now.
But love's much more,
So much more
than we can know.
than we could ever possibly.
We are one small glow
What an important
in the eternal flow. Melodies of long ago, songs of innocence, harmonies to soothe the soul, past the consequence. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, awakening joys of you and me. Silently the snow falls, bringing winter symphony.
all together now.
But we're much more
So much more
than we can know.
than we could ever possibly.
We are one small glow
What an important goal.
in the eternal flow. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow.
That's true. We will always glow. Good night, Travel M. Have a good day tomorrow.